What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, April 29th, 2019, start of a brand new week and just pretty much the end of the month here. Tomorrow will be the last day of April. And we have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it here. Apparently there's something going on down in Haiti. We don't have all the details about it yet, but the State Department has basically issued a warning that gunfire has been reported coming from the rear entrance to the U.S. Embassy in Haiti. And this is coming through the official Twitter account for the Department of State of Consular Affairs, and they're advising everybody in the area to shelter in place, which people tend to do that when they hear gunfire. Oh, gunfire, I'm just going to stand here and see if I got hit. But the government, trying to make itself like it looks like it's accomplishing something, is going to say, yes, you should shelter in place. Alrighty. Also, over this last weekend, down in Poway, California, which is near San Diego, there was a shooting, this time at a synagogue in California, Shabbat, Poway, and the shooter was a Trump-hating white nationalist, and everybody's already out there basically trying to politicize it one way or the other. Over at Hideout now, they're taking Ilhan Omar to task for a tweet that she put on out, denouncing her as the face of anti-Semitism here. But what she tweeted out was, "My heart is breaking after today's deadly shooting at Shabbat congregation in San Diego on the last day of Passover and 6 months to the day after the Tree of Life shooting. We as a nation must confront the terrifying rise of religious hate and violence. Love Trump's hate." I personally don't have a problem with that. And partly that is because I, too, am very concerned about this recent rise of religiously fueled violence and hate. And it's almost like somebody somewhere wants to trigger a religious war. Apparently, authorities in Los Angeles have arrested a suspect. They got to him first, but was planning a bombing in response to an attack on the mosque. Now, what was it that Gandhi said? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and soon the whole world is blind and toothless. That certainly applies here. And to all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, knock it off. Every one of these religions out there, except possibly the Vikings, claim to be religions of peace. And I know the vast majority of people who practice these faiths are peaceful and charitable and good people. And it's only a tiny, tiny minority that seem to get caught up in this religious hysteria. And again, postscript here, I want to know how many of these people are on prescription antidepressants. Now, the good news that came out of this shooting in the Shabbat of Poway was there was an off-duty U.S. Border Patrol agent who opened fire on the shooter, drove him off. And so there was one death, which is tragic, and a few other people injured. It would have been a lot worse. But for a good person with a gun to be in there dealing with a bad person with a gun. Now, of course, that's not what the gun grabbers are out there saying. They're saying, AR-15s are bad. AR-15s are bad. And these weapons of war. And they're out there twittering, saying, we have to ban these weapons of war. And they really don't understand the facts of the matter. Okay, in the 110 mass and spree shootings since 1982, in which there were 3 or more victims, 35.5% were perpetrated with a mix of rifles, handguns, and other firearms. 49% were perpetrated with only handguns. 10% were perpetrated with a mixture of shotguns and handguns. So there's a lot of shooting out there, and it's all of it bad. But everybody's hopping onto this thing to push their agenda. Ban the AR-15, ban the AR-15. Now, apparently, yesterday, there was another shooting in Baltimore at a Baptist church cookout. 7 shot, 1 killed. The gunman is still at large. But at this point, the Baltimore police are saying it had nothing to do with them being Baptists or the church. Apparently, it was an interpersonal dispute that just erupted into gunfire. And we know Baltimore right now has a lot of its issues. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. So let's turn to the war zones here. Over in Syria, as you know, there was a lull in the conflict, and unfortunately, ISIS and Al-Qaeda used that time to regroup and expand their activity. And over the past 2 weeks, ISIS cells operating in the Homs Deir Azor desert carried out several successful attacks on positions and convoys of the Syrian Arab Army and its allies. At least 24 pro-government fighters were killed. Several vehicles were destroyed or captured by ISIS terrorists. So the ISIS-linked news agency Amaq released a series of photos showcasing the terrorist group's successes in the area. Well, that sort of annoyed the government of Syria because they have really uncorked. And Russian Syrian forces are basically pounding the rebels in Idlib. And it was rather interesting. I guess we knew this was coming because last Friday we had this report about the movement of all these military assets getting over into Syria. So there we are. Okay. Interestingly enough, of course, one of these ways that the terrorists fund themselves in Syria, because they can't get it all from the United States, is they're seizing, or stealing actually, Syria's oil and smuggling it out of the country to sell on the black market, which I imagine right now is very healthy business with all of the sanctions that are going on over there. But apparently, civilians, the residents of the town of Al-Hassan, launched popular protest against the SDF in eastern Deir Azor by blocking the roads to the Syrian Democratic Forces oil tankers, which were headed to the Iraqi Kurdistan region. So they're taking matters into their own hands. Apparently, the civilians have taken control of Syrian Democratic Force weapons. So, apparently Saturday, the U.S.-backed Kurdish militants received state-of-the-art weapons and military equipment, including Israeli arms in eastern Euphrates. War, war, and more war. Now, interesting, there's been kind of a surprise development on the weapons of mass destruction table, if you will. As you know, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and now, of course, they're pulling out of another UN arms treaty. But apparently, Washington, D.C. floated the idea of a new nuclear forces treaty between the U.S., Russia, and China. And apparently both Russia and China are willing to sit down and talk it over, which I think would be a good thing. And I think all of the world powers understand very simply, the world is in conflict, and now is not a good time to have really powerful nuclear arsenals lying around. And very nervous commanders with little brass keys here. So it would be a good idea. Trump, of course, branded the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist unit. It served Netanyahu to help him win re-election. It certainly serves Israel and Saudi Arabia's interests, but it's designed to lock in endless enmity. Apparently, there had been cordial relations going on with the IRGC. There was even a treaty, which is now apparently in tatters. But what it will do is make an Obama-style rapprochement by a future president more difficult. So Trump is basically trying to lock the region into a war mentality. Now, the Trump administration has sent a message to China that they do not get a wind-down period for cutting their Iran oil purchases. The U.S. is telling China, you will stop buying Iran's oil May 1st, which is, of course, Wednesday. Now, Iran is backing off talk of closing the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is still open. Everybody is still using it, and everybody is playing by the rules. And Iran's top military commander is saying that the American ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz are responsive to the IRGC as the force in charge of security in the strategic waterway. So they're behaving themselves. So Iranian Armed Forces Major General Mohammad Bakiri told reporters yesterday that no change has so far been reported in the conduct of the U.S. warships, commercial vessels, and oil tankers, and they have, up until now, been responding to the IRGC's questions, as usual, while sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. And this chairman of the Chiefs of Staff said he said Iran wants the strait through which nearly 1/3 of all oil traded by sea passes to remain open and secure, warning that Iran will not allow anyone to destabilize the waters. Well, that certainly is a complete reversal from the talk we were getting just a little while ago about closing the Strait of Hormuz. But again, who's really in charge? Who's calling the shots? Apparently, the IRGC is sort of strutting its stuff, if you will. They claim to have accomplished a drone overflight of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower transiting the Strait of Hormuz. And the images show fighter planes parked on the carrier deck. And apparently a video published by the agency shows a light blue colored drone with the name Ababil 3 written on the wings. Okay, now here's a bizarre little story, and it's from the English version of Fard's News, and it points out how Donald Trump has once again humiliated the regime in Riyadh, saying that he likes the leader of Saudi Arabia, but Washington is protecting King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud and his son Mohammed bin Salman. Therefore, the oil-rich kingdom should pay more money. Now, this is Trump getting on back to the talk that he had about NATO picking up more of the expenses for their weapons, with the obvious intent that NATO and now Saudi Arabia buy more weapons from the United States. Seems to be the only part of our manufacturing that's in moderately decent shape here. But it's kind of a little weird when you consider the other hostility. And it's like we see there'll be one part of our foreign policy which is trying to play nice with other countries, and then there's the other part of our foreign policy which is thumping its chest and rattling its sabers and making war noises. More about that in a little tiny bit. Over in the town of Bar Elias in the Bekaa Valley in Syria, the Lebanese army stormed a Syrian refugee camp, removing tents and detaining most of the male refugees living there. The New Arabs affiliate Syria TV reported that the army destroyed 110 empty tents from the Yasmin refugee camp. These had been donated by humanitarian organizations for use in emergency situations. Up to 80 people were detained for not having the correct papers, and the Army also confiscated motorcycles belonging to the refugees. So that's not too good. Tulsi Gabbard is out with another video. She's out there at rallies and stuff, making the point. Our taxpayer dollars were being used to support terrorist groups in Syria. And she's absolutely right, and we've known it for quite some time. Another little story, this one out of Far's News, America's way of war killing civilians. And they're pointing out that since 2001, from Afghanistan to Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, and back to Afghanistan, the United States and its allies are killing civilians without end, to where the United Nations has once again warned that the U.S. and its allies are killing more Afghan civilians than the Taliban and the other armed groups do. Now, Friday we had that story where there'd been a study done and found that civilian casualties at the hands of the U.S. military were actually 10 times what the U.S. government was admitting to, which doesn't surprise anybody here. Okay. Over in Libya, apparently the Government of National Accord, which is the U.S.-approved puppets group, are claiming that foreign-owned warplanes were behind the strikes on Tripoli. And apparently there was a drone attack on Tripoli that took place on Saturday evening, noting that an investigation is underway in coordination with the United Nations. So somebody is coming to the aid of the Houthis and the Libyan government that the Libyan people want to have. The United Nations has come out with another report, was actually commissioned by the UN but done by the University of Denver, showing that the death toll in Yemen is, for lack of a better word, horrendous. And they're estimating the death toll will pass 230,000, that's 250,000, by the end of this year. And the Yemenis are dying of starvation, disease. They've had that cholera epidemic, the lack of health clinics and other infrastructure. In fact, more Yemenis are dying from those causes than from the actual fighting. So 230,000. Remember Eric Prince founded Blackwater, and it keeps changing its name because they're trying to stay out of the public eye here. It's called Frontier Services Group today, and it has not publicly stated it is working in Iraq, but apparently documents have surfaced showing it was registered there as a company last year. So they are apparently operating in Iraq. Turkey has indicted a third U.S. consulate employee and his wife and daughter on charges of membership in a terrorist group. And this is likely to strain ties between Ankara and Washington. Yeah, I think it will. I think it probably is going to do exactly that. One of two Emirati men, detained in Turkey on suspicion of both spying and having possible ties to the Jamal Khashoggi embassy murder case, has reportedly committed suicide in prison. He was arrested 10 days ago, and how very convenient for whoever is behind the Khashoggi murder. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call now from Dan in Illinois. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I got a quick one for you. Sig Sauer lands an Indian Army contract. Ministry of Defense has officially contracted Sig Sauer to build and deliver 72,400 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO SIG 716 rifles for its frontline infantry soldiers. And the Indian Army has the second largest standing army in the world. And these will be made in New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
I thought I'd drop that on you.
I didn't realize 6 Hour had a factory in New Hampshire.
Oh, neither did I. But I am for a well-maintained and well-armed defense army. You got to have that. But I thought I'd let you know about that one because I found it in the NRA Rifleman magazine.
Okay.
So
well, the NRA was apparently putting or lobbying Trump to pull out of that UN arms limitations treaty, and I imagine that all of the gun manufacturers are members of the NRA and use the NRA lobbyists.
I wonder if that's what Oliver North's dispute with management was, and that's why he's getting relieved after this term as president.
Yes.
Of the NRA.
Yep.
Because they're not. I haven't heard anything about why, but that could be why.
That could be.
But I thought I'd let you know. Yeah, I didn't know they were being made in New Hampshire. But yeah, that's 72,400 of them.
Well, it sounds like it's an impressive gun. I've never actually seen one, of course, but anyway.
Well, they got a picture of it here. There's a picture of it here. It is a nice looking gun. Okay. And a weapon like that in a well-trained army, and with the problems they're having with China, so looks like they might be gearing up. So
everybody's gearing up right now. That's what's going on. Everybody is gearing up.
Okay.
All right, so thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And let's see. The phone lines are open again. Over in Israel, their Attorney General has told Prime Minister Netanyahu there will be no delay over the corruption indictment. Now, Netanyahu's legal team has been trying to find a way to stall the process. I mean, after all, he is the prime minister. But according to Avichai Mandelblatt's office, he basically has written a letter to Netanyahu's lawyers saying if they wish to conduct a hearing over the investigative files pertaining to the case, they must coordinate by May 10th, which is the date for the hearing. So Netanyahu's going to be looking to cause some kind of a ruckus someplace as a distraction for political reasons. Speaking of political reasons here, as you know, Passover just ended. And apparently Israeli occupation authorities allowed settlers to celebrate Passover at the site of the former Amona outpost in the northern West Bank. Now, the location has been declared a closed military zone. The Palestinian owners of that land are not allowed to go in there, but apparently Israel has decided that this is a recreation spot for Jewish settlers during the Passover holiday. So, a little bit of double standards here. Good news, down in Texas, a federal court has become the third one to strike down the requirement for a pro-Israel oath as being unconstitutional. And it is. And I'm not going to swear an oath to a foreign government. That's unpatriotic. That's absolutely obscene. I'm a citizen of this country, and this country has my loyalty and support. Maybe not the government, but certainly the people and the land. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. We're going to start with Fred in Michigan. And Fred, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Michael. And I'm just looking at this paranoia as far as measles in this country. And they're going, oh, my God, we got 300 cases here and what have you. And I guess what they're talking about, and I understand in New York, you're going to fine people $1,000 and put them in jail or something like that. It's so stupid.
They're pushing the product.
You have to
They're pushing the product, and it's not even a safe product. Anyway, Fred, I'm going to put you on hold. Don't hang up. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I'm looking at the Fox News feed, and Biden's out there in the middle of his first rally, chanting, Middle America is the backbone of this country. And the first thing went through my head is, why are we breaking the backbone of this country? Because that's what's happening to the middle class. They haven't done a reverse angle. I can't see what the size of the crowd is. Anyway, getting on back to the phones. We were talking with Fred in Michigan. We're talking about this constant push of vaccines, the constant fear-mongering of measles. And it's a sales pitch. It is a sales pitch. They did this back in 2009 with the When Pigs Fly flu. Buy the vaccines, buy the vaccines, buy the vaccines, most of which wound up just being destroyed. Fred, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I didn't know. I guess what I'd like to say, I don't know how much time I have. We've had a scare up here with whooping cough, okay, in Traverse City, Michigan. And I did a couple of radio shows where we actually did, we actually went against people from the health department, what have you. The one thing I was going to say, we had a debate, and they lost big, heavy time. But they would never, ever, I called the health department many times and said, how many people who got the whooping cough, children, okay, actually were vaccinated? And but I guess what I'm just trying to say is that years ago, and I have to look, okay, I've done so much research on this, but Merck Pharmaceuticals, that owns the MMR vaccine.
Yes.
They own the patent for that, but under the government rules is that they have to show the efficacy, which means how percentage of the participants that get vaccinated will form the antibodies in their blood system, okay?
Yes.
And what happened is that they had to have 83 or 85% to actually keep their patent in place, and then they would lose their patent and it would go to some other pharmaceutical company, okay? What happened was these whistleblowers in Merck, okay, came out and said, well, no, we never met the efficacy regulations the government has stated we needed to get, so they fudged everything. They lied about everything. But these whistleblowers, thank God for whistleblowers in Merck and even the CDC, that no, they did not meet the guidelines as far as, how much it works. And we see that right now that most of the time, in Traverse City here, and I kind of cornered these people, but I found out that over 50% of the children who got the whooping cough were vaccinated.
Yes.
So the big thing is that they don't work, and I don't know where our politicians are right now, but the whole point is my children have never been vaccinated, and they're just as healthy as crap. Okay.
Yes. They're seeing the same thing in Japan. Japan has no vaccine mandate. Their kids are healthier than American kids.
Well, even, Japan, when they brought the MMR vaccine in there, they said, no, we're not going to do it because so many children were injured with it.
Yes.
And I guess I'm blessed because my sister is Mary Toko. She's probably one of the best research ladies on vaccine injury and what have you in the country. She had her own radio program. She has lots of doctors to work with her. And I just feel blessed on that point. But when people really find out what's in these vaccines, and I think Alex Jones said today, I don't mean to mention another program, Mike, but there was a story in one of the European newspapers to say that the British, German, all the politicians get really clean vaccines, and they leave the bad ones for us that are going to injure our children. And I did a couple of I do artwork also, and so I did a couple of programs where we would try and sell art or whatever. And I did 2 medical doctors that were researchers for congressional investigation on the injury rate as far as mercury. Okay, but
Yes.
they didn't do the aluminum, but Dr. Mark and David Geyer. And I talked to them extensively at the benefit. And they said that the U.S. government has known since God knows when, because they went through all the information. They've known since the 1940s that what they were doing was going to cause autism. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I remember
But
reading
all
an
I can
article.
remember- anyway,
I remember reading an article last week where they were talking about this county where there was this vaccine rate, and they had a certain rate of measles, and then because of financial problems with the county government, they had to stop the vaccination program, and the rate of measles went down.
because the measles live vaccine, and it does spread because they shed, And it's even like the polio vaccine. Many people I've heard that, okay, they had Albert Sabin, okay, and Jonas Salk. Albert Sabin had, the vaccine, which was the attenuated,
Yes.
but that was supposedly, it was the live vaccine, but just a little dead. Iowa and Idaho had to stop doing the vaccinations because it caused more polio, more paralytic polio than, people think that the vaccine cured. No, and even in 1973, Jonas Salk appeared before a congressional committee and said, all the polio is being created in the United States right now since 1959 or whatever is caused by the vaccine. So there's so much information out there.
Yeah, there is, but we're living basically in a fascist state where government authority and corporate greed are aligned together against the general population. Big Pharma wants to sell vaccines, and government is going to say, yes, we'll help you do it. We'll run propaganda campaigns. We'll claim there's a measles epidemic. We'll even make the stuff mandatory, and you'll just make lots and lots of money. And that's really what's driving it, is outright greed. Force people to buy products they don't want, may not even need, may even be harmful to them, but it's just all about grabbing more of that money.
And the thing is, Michael, that these people know. I was I was actually challenged by the TV station up here to have a discussion or a debate with pediatricians up here in northern Michigan. I said, I'd love to do it.
Yes.
I'd love to do it. Bring them on. It was going to be an hour and a half town hall. And, in all of northern Michigan, there's a lot of counties, a lot of whatever. They couldn't find one health department. They couldn't find one pediatrician, one immunologist. They couldn't find anybody to do the debate because, you know what? I realized then that these doctors know that they're damaging children and they're doing it for all financial gain, because I can't see a doctor that, if you believe in this stuff, come on, do the debate, and none of them would do it. They had to cancel the debate because no doctor in northern Michigan, no pediatrician, the pediatricians are ignorant. They're, way out in the left field. But there's nobody. And that has to tell you something, that they wouldn't debate a guy that has a high school education on the vaccine issue. And I want all the people to know that. Educate yourself and get your local TV stations to go get interested, or radio station, because I debated 2 people from master's degrees from the health department. We ate them alive. And my sister, everybody in Traverse City who doesn't vaccinate, we had so much information. All they could do was parrot, the stuff they get from the CDC and the pharmaceuticals. So It's
Yeah,
not hard
and
to do this.
the
You
CDC,
have
of course, is
eliminated
not
nature.
unbiased in the debate because they own the patents on, what, 20, 30 different vaccines that they make billions of dollars from every single year. Anyway, Fred, going to let you go here. Thank you for the call.
Thanks.
We've got another caller waiting on the line on a related topic. Steve in Florida, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, your topic here, the measles and the DPT is vaccine for the whooping cough. Last week or 2 weeks ago was whooping cough. Now it's measles again. But
Yes.
I had a neighbor came outside and spoke to me, and he was in a kind of a panic. And he knows I do the show on our BN, and he said, "Did you hear about this measles pandemic? This thing going on with the measles?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm following it, but you're making way too much out of this." And then I kind of had to quiz him a little bit, at least educate him a little bit. And I said to him, "Wayne, do you realize how many children there are in the United States under the age equal to or under the age of 18? He said, "No, I don't know." I said, "Approximately 74 million people. So do the math. You got 22 states, 626 cases supposedly right now. Do the math. You've got 73 million people, 73,999,371 children that are not, don't have the measles. So in perspective, it's a very small amount, and this is nothing more than just fear propaganda to get vaccine compliance is all it is."
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
And right now it's this, and then in the flu season, there'll be the flu pandemic again, and they'll start that one all up again. In the spring and the summer, they'll start up something new again next year. This is a pattern. Just watch the pattern, people. This is a pattern. That's all it is.
Yep. I'm sure they're already out there looking at, what's another disease that we can wag at the American people to scare them into their doctor's office.
Exactly. That's it for me, Mike. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open. Getting on back to the international news here. Over in Afghanistan, finally, after months, the Afghan parliament has been sworn in. And the reason it took so long is they have been dealing with allegations of massive rigging and irregularities. It looks like, by golly, we did teach those people of Afghanistan the American way of doing things. But apparently dozens of seats are still empty over disputed election results. Here in the United States, the U.S. is telling the activists who have been living in the Venezuelan embassy that they have to leave because it's Venezuelan sovereign territory and it is under the control of Juan Guaido, not Maduro. And Elliot Abrams was over there saying they have to leave. This is sovereign Venezuelan territory. And it's really striking to find anybody in the U.S. defending the Maduro regime. It's shameful to see them. So that's the latest talking point. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for supporting Maduro and resisting U.S. efforts to replace him. Last week, Russian foreign agent accused Russian foreign agent Maria Butina was sentenced to 18 months in prison. And Vladimir Putin has finally come out with a comment about it, saying it's an outrage. It's not clear what she was convicted of or what crime she committed. I think it's a prime example of saving face. They arrested her and put the girl in jail, but there was nothing on her. So in order not to look totally stupid, they fixed her up with an 18-month sentence to show that she had to be guilty of something. And he very well might be right. Over in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, the comedian who has won the presidential election, has dismissed an offer by Putin to provide Russian passports to Ukrainians and pledged instead to grant Ukrainian citizenship to Russians who suffer under the Kremlin's rule. Well, you know this Volodymyr, whose pocket he's in right now. Putin came back and said that Russians and Ukrainians would benefit from shared citizenship. So he's being very reasonable, whereas the new president of Ukraine continues to be confrontational. Speaking of Russia, a story that came out of your destination now, in fact, it was also on Fox News just a little while ago. Apparently, marine experts in Norway stumbled across a white beluga whale, which is a species of dolphin, that they think may have been trained by the Russian Navy as part of a program to use underwater mammals as a special ops force. And they're saying this because the whale appeared to be wearing some kind of a harness. And I think it's premature to say it's Russia doing this, but I do remember the U.S. Navy tried this with dolphins a while back, could not get it to work reliably because the cetaceans are so independently minded. They don't really follow orders all that well unless there's a fish right in front of them. Okay, let's take a phone call here. Patrick in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mr. Rivero, how you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine.
Yeah, I've noticed about the flat Earth. The last 10 minutes of your show, you go off on your little flat Earth, anti-flat Earth stuff. You make us look like we're stupid. But if you're a so-called Christian, then you would obviously understand what we're talking about.
Well, I personally am not a Christian.
What is the problem with then? Have you looked into what we're talking about when it comes to flat Earth theory and what how? Have you done that, or you just want to just play games on the air?
Well, you're the one who's playing games on the air. And again, that whole flat Earth nonsense is being put on out there to try and make the independent media look kooky.
Have you researched yourself? Have you looked into it yourself? Have you spent some time before coming on the air and going against it? Or
the Earth is not flat. It is a sphere. It's an oblate spheroid, and anybody who looks at lunar eclipses can get that confirmation. Anybody with a Foucault pendulum knows the Earth is actually moving. I mean, this got settled a long time ago by people like Columbus and Magellan. No, me personally, no.
Then you're wrong. You're flat out wrong. You're not. If you're not a Christian, then you're flat. Obviously, you're.
Okay. Well, Patrick, we need to take a commercial break. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently Biden just finished his speech over there in Pennsylvania, saying all the things people want to hear, higher minimum wage, access to lower cost education, and hitting his issue about middle-class Americans are the backbone of America. And they're finally pulling wide, and it's a moderately decent crowd. I mean, it's nothing like what Trump was pulling here. Let's go back to the phones here to Dustin in Missouri. Aloha, we have another Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Actually, no, it's Dustin from New Jersey.
Ah, okay. It is Dustin from New Jersey.
Unless I moved. Hey, Mike, I got to respond to Patrick, your last caller. I hate to break it to you, but I don't understand this whole, if you're a Christian, you believe the Earth is flat. Where does this come from? Look up in the sky when the sun sets. The planets are round, dude. They're not square or triangle or rectangles. I mean, I don't get it. I just don't understand. And Mike,
I mean, why does Patrick think we need time zones?
But Mike, isn't there evangelicals that don't believe in dinosaurs? They believe after the dinosaurs.
Yeah, there are some fundamentalists who think that dinosaurs and humans coexisted. I mean, there's all kinds of silliness out there, and it's religion. It is not science. And
they coexisted in the stomachs of the dinosaurs and humans. I just don't understand where this flat Earth crap. I mean,
I think it is a deliberate propaganda campaign to demonize anybody who questions the official story of anything. And I remember seeing it even in National Geographic when they had this article, "Why are people questioning science?" And look, Americans believe the Earth is actually flat. And no, we don't. It's a manufactured construct to basically kookify the independent media, the internet as a whole, or anybody who questions the official story of everything. And they keep pulling the same stuff up. I mean, I guess when all those foreign spacecraft actually imaged the Apollo landing sites and saw the remains of the lunar module there and everything, they had to come up with something else. And I guess flat Earth got to be it.
Mike, now I want to switch to something serious, not this kooky crap. All right. You said, Mike, I got to disagree with you. You said, like, with the Russia, with the U.S. pulling out, I don't think Russia should, and China should go along with any treaties the U.S. puts out, because it's not worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah, that is a factor. I'm sure that's going to be a factor. But all Russia said was they were open to the talks. They haven't actually, made any commitments to do anything.
Yeah, because you can sign a treaty, but then, the U.S. will just pull out of it anytime, they want, whenever they feel like it doesn't serve their interests or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I think that's great. And Mike, do I have time for one more thing, or?
Well, I'm going to take you through the station identification break. So stay on the line, and we'll be right back after these few minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we still have Dustin on the line talking about Russia and China. And you raise a very valid point. Why would anybody enter into an agreement with the United States, given the U.S. government's recent history of simply ignoring or walking away from treaties? And I'm sure it's an issue that weighs heavily on Kim Jong-un's mind as well.
Exactly. Like, why would you bother? I mean, it's embarrassing, though. We got a new treaty for no, you pulled out of the old one. Why would I sign something new? That just don't make no sense. Like I said, Mike, the Chinese and the Russians, they just need to, stay away from the West, because everything's just so there's no truth anymore from the Western. Even with the Norway, with the whale. How do you know they didn't put that thing on the whale, Because there's a lot of crap going on with a lot of Russia did this, Russia did that. The Skripals, which you don't hear from again. It was all lies, So I wouldn't put it past them for another lie, I think the whale had Putin's picture on, on his back, like tattoos, I mean, it's a joke to believe anything coming out of Norway or Sweden or any of these countries, because they're already been bought and paid for. And Poland, Lithuania, and Romania, and the rest of them. But, hey, Mike, you said, the people are in the embassy in Venezuela, and that's, sovereign territory, right?
No, the activists are in the Venezuela embassy in the U.S.
But didn't Elliot Abrams says that's Venezuelan sovereign territory to them?
Yeah, well, that's the way it works. The embassy of a country is considered sovereign territory of that country, regardless of where it physically is.
No, I know that, but how come the U.S. didn't have a problem with Russia's sovereignty when we went into their embassy? Remember when we seized their embassy?
Yep. They did kick up a fuss, in fact, when that happened.
Yeah. I find it amazing how it's a sovereign territory, but they'll put a puppet in Guaido and his people. And it's just a joke, man. I mean, geez. I mean, I never seen anything like this. It's just it's comical. I mean, it's really comical. I mean, they must be desperate to try to pull these stunts, and it's not working. Maduro's not going anywhere. I mean, we're on day what? And there's no war started yet, right? So far, and they're not.
The Venezuelan people are backing Maduro. The Venezuelan military are backing Maduro, and of course, the neocon war hawks in Washington D.C. are out there saying invade, 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 because they don't have to go. Their kids don't have to go. It's going to be other people's children. So my concern is that, as near as I can tell, and again, I'm not in a position to really know for sure, we got to be running out of bullets and supplies with all these wars that we're running all over planet Earth that have gone on way longer than they were originally forecast to.
Mike, I think we're running out of people with any, like, brains and critical thinking skills, because these people are a joke. Like Mike Pompeo, everything coming out of his mouth's a joke anymore. I mean, the Russians are going to, they've been getting into our, did you hear him? The Russians been interfering with our elections since the 70s, and they'll do it up to, they'll do it through 2050. Because I know that, because, you know, we were, you know, I mean, it's just, I mean, how can people keep believing this crap?
Well, the latest polls are saying that people aren't believing the crap, and that's why the corporate media is now in panic mode to shut down the independent media any way that they can, because their entire stock in trade, what they got paid all that money to do, was control the minds of the American people, and they've lost that.
And it's just scary because you got James Clapper on CNN, and you got Brennan on MSNBC, and who else is on those shows? There's people on Fox News, and the narrative is Russia this, Russia that. But Mike, remember I told you before, it's just, this narrative's not going to end. It's just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. It's got a life of its own now. There ain't no stopping it. You know,
yeah, I mean, they're going to be pushing it into 2020 so that if the wrong candidate wins again, they're going to scream it was Russian influence. It's part of that whole propagandizement of Russia as the bad guy. And I recognize it because when I was in school in New England, in our little social studies book, were all these little cartoons demonizing the Soviet Union and telling us how horrible they were. And a lot of people grew up just absolutely believing that. And I did too. I didn't really challenge it up until the point where I actually got to meet some people from the Soviet Union, and they didn't rip my head off. They were actually quite pleasant. Dustin, are you there? Okay, I think we lost Dustin, so let's do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And let's go to Bruce in Texas. Aloha, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha, Mike. Oh?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll just continue on his point, just to finish it up there, or your point about the Soviets. Isn't it strange that until Stalin purged the Khazars out of his government that were committing the genocides and all that through the 20s and 30s, they were our best friends. And then after World War II, they become our enemy. I think that's just kind of funny there. The New York Times sent a reporter into Russia to investigate the reports of mass genocide of Christians, and he came back and wrote a column that basically downplayed the whole thing. That said he didn't see anything.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've met people during the Soviet Union time, and when I was working offshore and working in maritime activities, and yeah, they didn't rip my head off either. They seemed to be pretty. They didn't want to talk much about certain political issues, but they're rather guarded. But they were good people. But anyhow, I'm pretty black-pilled on all this false flag stuff. I don't know how we're ever going to stop it. It just seems like they pull one every other week now.
Yes.
And have you looked into the San Diego synagogue shooting yourself at all?
Not really. I had other things I had to take care of over the weekend, and I had to sort of pull away from the computer.
Yeah, I understand. Well, it's just I got a medical background, and so I see this. Supposedly, the rabbi got shot and had both his index fingers blown off. So he had a cast over his hands, and he's waving his arms around. And I broke my finger once, and it was just excruciating pain. I mean, you're just guarding it and throbbing, and
yep.
terrible, you know. And here's this guy waving around papers, giving interviews, laughing and stuff with the two fingers blown off on his hand. It's ridiculous. And we don't see any pictures, any real pictures, again, of anyone being medevaced out. You don't see no one on stretchers that are actually bleeding. You don't see the dead person. And then the doctor, before his wife was killed, said that he was doing CPR, and he didn't even know it was her until after a little bit of doing CPR. How do you not recognize your own wife?
Yeah, that's a pretty bizarre story. That's pretty bizarre. And again, there is so much of this religiously based violence going on, whether it's the thousands of churches in Europe that have been attacked over the last few months, and which is a lot of people to question whether Notre Dame really was just an accident. We have the mosque shooting. Now we're having the synagogue shooting, and it does seem like somebody is trying to drive the human race to a religious war.
Yeah, it's divide and conquer. It's order out of chaos, you know. And the sheriff of San Diego County, he has a real iffy background as Sheriff Gore. He was an FBI agent for 32 years. He was deeply involved in the Ruby Ridge FBI assault, and he pled the fifth during an investigation of the shooting of Randy Weaver's wife. And you know, here he is now. He's in the middle of this. You know, we had FBI agents there, and the FBI agent's son there in Parkland. You know, it's just I just don't have any confidence left in any of our three-letter agencies or any of our large city law enforcement or politicians. It just seems like they're all corrupt, and they're all playing this damn game on the American people, and I'm just fed up as hell with it, you know.
Okay.
Anyhow, that's what all I got to say there.
Okay, well, thanks an awful lot for that one, and we're going to switch over to Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Oh, I guess we lost Peter in California. So let's go to Herman in Georgia. Aloha, Herman. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
All right. It has been said that the three religions, Islam, Christians, and Jews, come from Abraham, but there is alongside a reason for the religious infighting. Six of them really. One is Ishmael was the unauthorized, or actually bastard, son of Abraham.
Okay.
And in more than 7 places, Yehovah is cited as saying that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Ishmael is not mentioned. And in the Bible, God appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not to Ishmael. But one thing, the Catholic regime created Islam in an attempt to win the Holy Land for the Pope, but the Muslims double-crossed the Pope and kept it for themselves.
Okay.
And lastly, Catholics are really not Christians, even though the lower-ranking members think they are. Constantine created a state religion that was part Roman occult and certain aspects of parts of Christianity to try to mix it together so it'd be more accepted. But they're not really Christians.
Well, one of the problems I have with all of these different sects is they all go around saying we're the true Christians and the other guys are not. And very often that can lead to friction. And again, more of this religiously inspired slaughter. And I'm one of those people who thinks that in a great many ways the world would be much better off without religion.
To an outsider, one might think that, but not everyone that calls themselves a Christian is or actually follows what is, let's say, the law of Christianity, or what has been, what true Christianity stands for. But this is not a religious program, and so it's not what I would get into. But if they're Trinitarian, they're not following true Christianity, and that's about 95% of those that call themselves Christians.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the theocracy lesson, and we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I want to talk about this latest synagogue shooting, and it's interesting how this played out. Got a buddy of mine who's visiting from Kansas, from Wichita, Kansas. Been here for a little over a month now. He's probably leaving first of the month to head back over there to Wichita for his grandson's graduation. But he came to spend some time with me and hang out because he's been here before and he really likes it. And we're sitting in the huddle house or the other day, and he points at the TV monitor up there, and of course, they got it on mute, so they got the closed caption. And I'm looking, and I'm seeing this new synagogue shooting in Patow.
Yeah.
Now, I'm looking at this, and I'm kind of watching. I'm reading the closed captioning, and after about 5 minutes, I turned back and I looked at him, and I said, "Now you watch what's going to happen. They're going to pound on this for the next 2 to 3 days, and within 48 hours, you are going to hear white nationalists."
Yep.
You'll hear he's an online manifesto. You'll hear he's a hardcore conservative Trump supporter.
Actually, they described him as a Trump hater.
Huh?
They described him as a Trump hater.
That was the one that I missed. I missed on that one. But I went through a whole list of things. I said, now, if you start seeing these things pop up, your red flag warnings should go up.
Yes.
Because this is MO. This is how they play this out. Now, you add to that, what did we learn today? I heard today for the first time, they just thwarted another radical bomber. And you start mixing this all together, along with all the church shootings and everything else that's going on. Like you said, Mike, I think we are headed for a religious war.
Yes.
Maybe they're trying to revive the crusade. I don't know, man. But this is starting to look like the makings of something really serious.
I agree. I mean, especially if you look over in Europe, where they have managed to basically blend an almost equal number of Muslims with the Christians. If that were to blow up, if somebody were to declare jihad, Europe would be destroyed.
Oh, it would be over. It would be done.
Maybe that's how they're going to depopulate the earth. Get the Christians and Muslims to kill each other off. Or certainly Israel would love it if the Christians and Muslims killed each other off. What am I saying? Who would pay retail?
And I bet there's a lot of people would be lining up to buy front row seat tickets.
Yes.
Anyway, thanks, Mike. Have a great one. Bud.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome back. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Sorry, I got disconnected or something before, but you ever watch, are you a fan of Westerns, Mike?
Some, not hardcore. I mean, I love the movie Silverado, and I'm certainly eager for the next season of Westworld to come back on.
I get the biggest kick out of watching the old Lone Rangers and Roy Rogers show where they run around shooting out of jeeps and stuff. But I'll tell you, one of the rhetorical devices that it really works well, and I lament that it has the word white in it because it will be taken badly. And I agree with people. There is a war on a white identity and all. But when I refer to the government, I thought it very useful to the government or even the president or whatever to call him just say, you mean the great white father said? You know?
Yes.
Like the Indians used to docilely say, "Oh, the great white father." It's very, their treaties weren't any good either. Their word wasn't any good either.
True.
And it's just a great rhetorical device to use. Everybody can sort of relate to it.
Yeah. You know what's really frustrating for me right now? I've been following this stuff now for 25 years. I've been doing radio for over 10. And the stuff just seems to grind on and on and on, and there's never a resolution. There's never a point at which any of this stuff is ever actually settled. It just sort of fades into the distance. It's like with the murder of Vincent Foster. I had no idea that this many years after the fact that they'd still be saying, oh, it was a horrible suicide, and they dragged apparently Ken Starr's come out of retirement to insist, oh yes, it was Hillary's nagging that did it. It was Hillary's nagging. Anyway, Peter, do you have any more?
Well, that, Mike, there's never resolution. There's never accountability
True.
At almost any level.
All right, well, we got to take a break for
Thanks,
commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And following up on my comment to Peter, we're all raised with movies and TV shows, and I worked in movies, TV shows, where whatever's happening resolves. There's a resolution. And that's what's missing in real life. Nothing ever resolves. It just keeps on going. The machine just keeps running forward, extracting wealth from the masses for the elites. So it's very frustrating. Very frustrating indeed. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here. Rob in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Thank you. Got me?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Okay, very good. I wasn't sure if I went through. All right, cool. I didn't hear your entire call with Peter, but just in response to you saying when we grew up with TVs and stuff, there has to be a wrap to it, and that's what they're doing with a lot of these storylines. If they wrap it up, they put a nice little tight little bow on it, and as faster they can do it, it prevents people from, gives people resolve immediately, and they won't cease looking further into the story. So let's just take this latest incident in California. Immediately, they catch a person. Boom, we caught them. No need to look further. We got it. Here's the story. Here's all these facts that we have immediately about this person. And look, he even wrote us a big, nice note, similar to what they just did in New Zealand. Look, you see, they did it over there. So this is a telltale sign. They're writing big notes now because this is now the bad. So basically wrapping it up and putting a nice bow on it, which is perfectly said. We are conditioned by television programming.
Well, I would agree there are reasons to suspect that a lot of these incidents are manufactured. Unfortunately, real people are dying. And that's because we live with a government for whom killing off a bunch of civilians, is a small price to pay to make the political point they're trying to make. In this case, I'm not sure exactly where this is all going, except it does seem to be fanning up religious hysteria pretty much all over the globe.
Right. Well, what inspired me to call is that caller 2 or 3 calls ago, when he started going over all the facts or details that he has learned about through this California incident. He was spot on. The rabbi has 2 fingers blown off. He's got cast on, but he's just waving his arms around. People would be on pain meds again. There's just all these little details. And he was really, really good at this. One of the things I immediately pointed out, and listen to this, I didn't read any articles about this. The only thing I've been hearing is what people have been talking about through these broadcasts. I haven't looked at any photos. I haven't done any research, whatnot. But one of the first things that came out was the hero, because they have to place a hero into these stories now, was a Border Patrol agent, off-duty Border Patrol agent. Now, who has been getting crushed with bad press? The Border Patrol. They've been the welcoming committee, the escort service for all these illegals, basically catch and release thousands. We're elevated in all these illegal border crossings from the foreign nationals, and they had to give some good press to the Border Patrol agents. So they created this Border Patrol to kind of give a little bit of boost to their reputation. Did you think about this at all?
I thought about it, but I'm a tremendous believer in Occam's razor, which is that the simplest explanation is usually the best. And I know it's a lot of fun to try and, sort of weave all sorts of additional details into an incident to make it seem more nefarious or more interesting. But that being in San Diego, there are a lot of Border Patrol agents there, and they do go to religious services. Again, it was great that this guy was there with his weapon, because otherwise it would have been a lot worse. I think it was intended to be a lot worse.
Right. Again, I haven't done the research. More will come out, and I'll probably start looking into it myself and listen to, people such as James Fetzer or Ola Damagard or, those others that talk about it, Kevin Barrett. They'll be talking about this, and I'm sure I'll pick up more information as it goes along. But I did watch the Trump rally in Green Bay over the weekend, and within his first 2 lines, he said, "We must defeat anti-Semitism and hate crimes in this country." So he wasn't saying anything about it, anybody else. It was right away, anti-Semitism is what must be defeated and protect, and that's a group that should be protected, and anything that goes on is automatically a hate crime. So, if I was driving down the road and I had someone who jumped out in front of my car and that person had to be any race, color, and creed other than my own, it's immediately going to be considered a hate crime. And if it happened to be of the Jewish persuasion, I was an anti-Semite, even though it was a total accident because I jumped out in front of my car and I didn't see him in time. So that is an agenda, Mike. And you go over so many. Nobody other than you, and there are some others, broadcasts, whatever. You read these stories every single day. If I were you, I'd be like, "Oh, there's another one that looks just this one, and I've learned about this one." And and this stuff should be like coming out to you like.
All right. Well, Rob, sorry to cut you off. We're going to have to let you go. We got to do a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha. Welcome back to our show here. Just sending a message to somebody here. Okay, so the phone lines are open, and we're going to get on back to our international news here. So over in Korea, as you know, they just had a summit between North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un and President Vladimir Putin. And a lot of people are saying that this is more significant than just the relations between Russia and North Korea, because it's basically reaffirming that we have gone back to being a multipolar world. Now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States set itself up. We're the only remaining superpower, ignoring China, of course. And that was the whole agenda of the Project for the New American Century back in the 1990s. We're the world's only superpower. Let's go on out and act like it. Well, that monopolar world is going away. And mostly it's self-destructing because of the way the United States abused its position. So a lot of people are out there saying that, yeah, the United States is in decline. It's losing influence. It's certainly lost moral authority. It is losing economic influence around the world. And unfortunately, in its dying throes, the empire is simply lashing out at everybody. Okay. Now, John Bolton is out there trying to clear up this mess, if you will, regarding the medical payments to North Korea for Otto Warmbier's care. After he'd gone into a coma, North Korea sent the United States a bill for $2 million. And there was the question, did we pay it or not? And there was a signed agreement. A U.S. official signed a document planning to send the money, but Bolton insisted yesterday on Fox News Sunday that no, we didn't send the money. We stiffed those people for good on that bill. Meanwhile, 2 U.S. warships, the William P. Lawrence and the Stetham, once again sailed through the Taiwan Strait to thumb their nose at Beijing. It's going to further inflame tensions with China at an especially sensitive time for the trade negotiations. And so you have to wonder why. Trump is, or at least was, trying to dial up better trade with China. So why annoy them? Why annoy them in the Taiwan Strait? Why annoy them in the South China Sea? I'm looking at the way that foreign policy is being run, and I understand that this isn't really Trump, that this is Bolton and Pompeo. And I'm wondering, where is that crack negotiator that we read about in The Art of the Deal? Did he actually have that book ghostwritten or something? Because he's not proving to be very skilled at international relations. And now Russia has dropped out of the top 5 countries with the largest defense spending for the first time since 2006. And they spend a lot less than the United States does. Meanwhile, the United States, of course, is spending more. So is China. The world military expenditures rose to $1.8 trillion in 2018, according to new data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. This is 2.6 increase. Now, Russia, and there we are. Sorry about that. I'm having to run multiple things here. Getting to our domestic politics, a lot of people are still out there pushing on the Mueller report. And the new spin now is that Mueller somehow protected Donald Trump, that there was collusion, that there was ample evidence of collusion, and Mueller sold out and protected Trump. They believe, they do so want to believe. But what the Mueller report really indicted was the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory itself. I mean, look how long that went on all over the media for 2+ years. And the Democrats are not going to let go of it. They're going to keep on saying, oh, yes, Trump and Russia were colluding, and it was a cover-up. Mueller covered it up for him. Now, Jerome Corsi is now out there claiming that Mueller's team tried to pressure him to plead guilty during an interview with Breitbart News Tonight. And he's saying that he got subpoenaed back on August 28th. He provided his computers, his laptops, backup devices, everything. He voluntarily gave the special counsel and prosecutors, and from the beginning, they treated me like I was already known to be a criminal. Now, Corsi said prosecutors suspected that he'd communicated with Julian Assange, whose website published embarrassing emails stolen from the Democratic National Committee. Corsi claimed prosecutors tried to convince him to admit to being that link so that they could then establish collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. By the way, we are hearing rumblings that as soon as Assange is able to make a public statement, that he's going to come on out and say, yes, it was Seth Rich all along, which may be why he's being held incommunicado. Not even his lawyers are being allowed to see him. Now, he was allowed a visit by the United Nations Special Rapporteur regarding claims that his privacy was violated. So he's starting to get some people in there. Remember Michael Cohen? Apparently, he was on this 36-minute recorded phone call to actor Tom Arnold, who's very left-wing, and he's a Trump hater. And Cohen is apparently walking back parts of his guilty plea, saying, no, I didn't really do that. I was just under pressure to say that I did. Trish Reagan is out there saying that the Obama FBI was literally weaponized for political purposes, and that the checks and balances of what was once the great American Republic have failed. So this abuse of institutional government power for political purposes, one thing the Founding Fathers tried to prevent and mostly had for hundreds of years, appears to have transpired in 2016. Of course, we saw during Watergate how that all got taken care of. Well, this was the week that Attorney General Bill Barr was going to show up for a hearing before Congress on Thursday. Now he is basically saying it may not happen because he was originally told it was just going to be a hearing. He was going to give testimony. And apparently the Democrats are now saying they want to bring in lawyers to literally grill him. And the Department of Justice obviously objects to that. So now the Democrats are saying, well, we're just going to go ahead and subpoena you. And of course, the Democrats are after the redacted portions of that Mueller report. They still believe that there's something in there. Okay. Over at the Gateway Pundit, they're reporting that former U.S. Attorney Joe DiGenova joined former Governor Mike Huckabee and Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani Wednesday on the Ingraham angle, at which point DiGenova said there is a solo report on James Comey that is coming out in about 2 weeks, and it says the report will contain criminal referrals. Well, we're hearing a lot about criminal referrals all over the place, but I still haven't seen an indictment. A criminal referral looks bad, but nothing's being done. Excuse me, I have the hiccups again. Over at the Federalist, they have an article detailing how James Clapper knew there was no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion all the way back in 2016. And it was they just sat on it because it made such a great narrative to go after Trump. Over in Baltimore, the Mayor Catherine Pugh, I think that's how it's pronounced, is dealing with a major scandal. It seems that she is the self-published author of a series of children's books, but apparently there were companies that wanted Baltimore contracts, and somewhere along the way, these companies bought her books in bulk, which is seen as a thinly disguised bribe. So now she's out there playing the victim card, claiming that she's too sick and not lucid enough to make any decisions about resigning in the face of this federal corruption probe. Over in Chicago, their top prosecutor, Kim Foxx, has been subpoenaed to appear in court for a hearing over her handling of Empire actor Jussie Smollett's high-profile case. And apparently Smollett is also requested to appear at the hearing. Now, Fox is under fire because she dropped all 16 felony disorderly conduct charges related to the filing of a false police report. And apparently more recently went ahead with a similar charge against another individual. So it appears to be a case of selective prosecution, and she's now in hot water over that. Speaking of hot water, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had this so-called fun run in Queens, and it was a 5K run. It was the Family Fun Run supporting U.S. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But many of the runners didn't realize their registration fees were not going to the GOP, to the Democratic National Committee, but were going directly into her campaign funds, her campaign war chest. and that may have broken a federal law, because a lot of the so-called registration fees were for children as young as 3. And children are not allowed to just make a donation unless they know where it's going to, and it's made knowingly and voluntarily by the minor. And apparently at this event, there were adults who clearly did not know where the money was going. They thought they were benefiting the Green New Deal. Alrighty. Now here's a little bit of good news. The United States Supreme Court has ruled unanimously to limit the ability of state and local governments to seize property, including through the controversial practice of civil asset forfeiture. Voting 9-0, the justices found that the Constitution's prohibition on excessive fines under the Eighth Amendment applies not only to the federal government, but also to state and local authorities, and that practices such as civil asset forfeiture, where law enforcement can seize the property of anyone accused of criminal activity, regardless of whether they're ever convicted or even charged, ran afoul of that restriction. Well, I imagine there's a lot of police departments all over the country that are going to be upset about that one. They'd sort of gotten used to having this this freeway full of open wallets that they could dip into whenever they felt like they wanted to. But the Supreme Court unanimously said, no, civil forfeiture runs afoul of the Eighth Amendment. And 9-0, that's a firm decision. So let's talk about the economic news here. Last week, of course, the United States came on out with the announcement that our economy is growing. The gross domestic product is expected to grow by something like 3.5% this next year. But a lot of articles have surfaced, including this one at Investment Watch Blog, saying that if you sort of look under the hood, the numbers don't really mean all that much relative to ordinary Americans. The economic growth appears to be confined almost exclusively to the financial services sector. And earnings are actually down an average of 3% year over year, meaning we may already be in a recession. And it's very hard to figure out what you're doing when you know you're being lied to about all those numbers, like the unemployment numbers. We know those are a joke. Now they're lying about the GDP. They stopped publishing the M3 aggregate years ago, and the M3 aggregate is the total amount of U.S. currency in circulation, which is a very accurate and reliable indicator of inflation. But they just decided that's not a number that you needed to have. Just watch the talking head on the corporate TV news. They're going to tell you everything is fine, and if you just believe it and relax, you'll have a happy evening. Now, China's Xi Jinping is out there promoting the Belt and Road Initiative, and apparently following this most recent conference on it, brought in more than $64 billion in investment. And right now, the total value of projects stands at $3.67 trillion, spanning countries in Asia, Europe, Africa, Oceania, and South America. So China is making deals while the U.S. tries to make war. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Jeff in Florida. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You're on my mind, actually. I was thinking back when you said that you had some depression.
Yes.
And actually, I'll tell you my reaction. I was actually pleased because I thought I was the only one after all the stuff that was going on and how the Clintons were getting away with all this stuff. I thought I was the only one with depression, but I'm glad you came out in the air and said you had it as well.
Well, yeah, it's been 25 years, and I really didn't think things were going to be this bad at this point. And, I'm not going to go take antidepressants or anything like that, but I'm not my normal cheerful self. This is unfortunately a very rough time between Claire's back injury and the fact that I'm feeling my age now. Times are very, very tough for us right now.
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to call about. I was suffering the same thing, and I started this diet, the keto diet.
Yes.
And I noticed a lot of my pain, my aches and pain, my back pain, all started to go away, and it helped stabilize my mood. I don't know if you've tried it or know much about it, but I can.
Well, I'll take a look at it because right now anything that eases Claire's pain, and right now it's a little rough. Apparently, she did suffer some nerve damage from the spinal fracture. She's been having trouble walking ever since, but more recently, she falls down a lot. She fell down 3 times over the weekend, and I'm just having to basically look after her and get her around from place to place so that she doesn't fall down anymore.
I have a whole lot of information on that. I wish you were in the mainland. I could possibly refer you to some places that can help with that. But on another note, I wanted to talk about the rise of communism. When I first listened to your show, I heard you talk. I think you spent about a total of 3 minutes. You opened my eyes about JFK, Bush, and Castro, and you took about 3 minutes to explain the whole ordeal, and that was absolutely amazing. I was wondering if you could do the same with the rise of communism, about Trotsky and how he got to Mexico and started spreading his ideas.
Well, I have to be very honest. I am less informed about that than other people, except that, it was basically Trotsky and his ilk took advantage of the lingering anger in the Russian people, over the Tsars to basically say, we're going to do a new system where everybody gets an equal share of the wealth and it's not piled up in places like the Amber Room. And that does play to a certain segment of our population, which is why they're trying to bring it back here. They're not going to call it communism. I'm surprised they're even calling it socialism, because for people my age, even that carries a negative connotation with it.
Nope.
Okay?
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to take another station break here for identification, and we'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we are just now getting word that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has submitted his resignation to the Department of Justice. So interesting timing, just as Barr, is getting set to testify before the Congress. And so basically, I'm looking on down real quick. His resignation will be effective May 11th. And it doesn't have the usual platitudes about wanting to spend more time with his family. So we don't know what's going on. But my gut is telling me this wasn't really his idea. All right, getting on back to the economic news. We were talking earlier about the foolhardiness of attempting to come to a new trade deal with China at the same time you're sailing warships through the Taiwan Strait and making noise in the South China Sea. Well, it looks like the trade talks aren't happening. We've been hearing all last week about they were close, they were close, they were close. And apparently Donald Trump is threatening to just walk away from the table. Trump is saying he isn't satisfied with how the talks are progressing. Okay, over in the metals markets, there is near record gold shorting by speculators. They're expecting the price of gold to go down. And even if it does, hang on to it. It always goes back up. But apparently, traders, investors, speculators rather, they're convinced the upward trajectory of the stock market will continue. That it's guaranteed, that it's locked in, that they've got the system rigged up so the equities are going to keep on going, and they're all euphoric about it. And of course, anytime the stock market is up, the metals tend to do rather poorly. And I guess that's where this is all coming from, is somebody somewhere is expecting a huge new surge to the stock market. Story out of Press TV, U.S. oil sanctions on Iran harm global markets and stability. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. There are a lot of countries that do oil business with Iran that are now scrambling to try and find other supplies and suppliers. And that's going to drive prices up around the world, which means brace yourself for a shock the next time you're at the gas pump. Speaking of brace for shocks, another article, this one out of Investment Watch blog, brace for a shock surge in everyday food prices. And yes, between the shortened growing season that we had last year and this year, the massive flooding taking place in the farmlands, yeah, there are going to be food shortages. People are going to be going hungry. Now, Beto O'Rourke has come up with a solution to the problem of chronic poor nutrition in impoverished communities. Basically, during a Friday event hosted by the Nevada State Democratic Party at a local brewery in Henderson, the former congressman called for the establishment of farm-to-table restaurants in every community to combat poor nutrition. And it's seriously out of touch and laughable. If the poor can't afford food from a grocery store, how the heck can they go out to a restaurant? Beto's just totally disconnected from what real life is like. Last week we were talking about how the Social Security Trust Fund is going to go into the red next year. Current predictions are it will be completely bankrupt by 2035. Now remember, that was all your money, and you entrusted it to the government to manage it, to make it grow, and they botched it up. Remember back during the Clinton administration, they looted that fund to make Clinton's magic federal budget surplus. They, quote unquote, borrowed the money out of there, replaced it with treasury bills, which now cannot be redeemed. So things are going to be very, very hard for a lot of people. Okay. Apparently in places like, well, Los Angeles, West Coast cities, you know, there's the good neighborhoods and then there's Skid Row. But apparently there are so many homeless people in these cities now, they're having to basically start camping out in the good neighborhoods. And the elitists are just freaking out. Homeless people are taking over their neighborhoods all over the West Coast. And that, of course, is a real problem. No city on the West Coast has a bigger problem with homelessness than Los Angeles does, and many of the homeless population enjoy camping out on the beautiful beaches in the LA area at night. And I assume that the police come over and chase them away before the tourists show up the next morning. We have the same thing here in Hawaii. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Getting on back to the homeless situation. Kaiser Health News is reporting that a record number of homeless people died across Los Angeles County last year on bus benches, parks, hillsides, railroad tracks, and sidewalks. The deaths skyrocketed 76% in the last 5 years, far outpacing the growth in the city's homeless population. Well, there are many possibilities there. With the homeless population growing, the available resources to keep them fed are under stress and under strain. We know that the homeless population is dealing with, let's see, they have an epidemic, hepatitis C, I think it is. That's a problem. At some point, you have to wonder, where are the government's going to start thinking about maybe putting a little bit of poison out there, the way they do for the rats. Over in Spain, unemployment is still miserably high. Spain has been claiming 6 years of economic growth, but the unemployment is high. It is still going up. I think the economies have moved away from the civil population, and they're living almost entirely inside the computers of the financial centers. And so it looks good in there if you're living inside one of the computer centers, but everybody else is being just disenfranchised. Over at the Vatican, Pope Francis is sending $500,000 to help the migrants who are in Mexico trying to reach the United States. This was a report from Vatican News. Now, unless you have a shortwave radio, you may not be aware that the Vatican has its own broadcasting facility. If you look very closely at the top of the Vatican in Google Earth, you can see the antennas. And right now, I understand there's another bunch of these migrant hordes that are just pouring on in. The United Nations is helping these migrant caravans that are making a mockery of our immigration laws and the asylum process. The United Nations is eroding U.S. sovereignty. Why do we go on paying all this money to the organization when they are clearly working against our national interest? Apparently, Border Patrol is being forced to release migrant families in Tucson by the thousands. They lack the space to detain them, and immigration officials are unable to take them into custody. We're going to start looking like Venezuela here pretty soon. Border Patrol is also saying there are radio advertisements playing in Central America, encouraging citizens to flee to the U.S. illegally to obtain the American dream. And you listen to your radio on the way to work, on the way to the grocery store. That country is advertising, if you want the American dream, we'll help you out. We'll teach you how to get in the United States. I want to know who's paying for these radio ads. Okay. As you know, Donald Trump is heading for a state visit in Great Britain, and the British people aren't very happy about it. Trump is being slammed as a threat to the world order. They're going to get out that big Trump baby balloon again. Labor Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry saying this should not be allowed to happen in light of his recent decision to pull out of the unratified International Arms Trade Treaty. In her opinion, the move was the final confirmation Trump is not the leader of the free world. He never has been, and he does not deserve the honor of a state visit to Britain. Well, the world isn't really all that free. In fact, more and more we're seeing freedom around the world is just being eroded. And to look down at New Zealand, that one kid who shared the video of the Christchurch mosque shooting is looking at 14 years in prison. British authorities are planning to build a massive wall at the site of this World War II memorial that Trump is planning to visit to mark the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And the British people are very upset because this will keep them from paying their tribute to the war veterans as well, which is what the memorial is for. So Trump gets a wall. Trump gets a wall. Arizona doesn't. Texas doesn't. New Mexico doesn't. California doesn't. But Trump gets his wall. Story coming on out from Breitbart. Apparently, during the recent economic forum in Davos, former Prime Minister Tony Blair, George Soros, and an unnamed top EU commissioner apparently had a private little conversation. The stated objective was to prevent Great Britain from leaving the European Union. They're still out there trying to figure out a way to direct. This is all coming from Soros. He dreams of a one-world government. That's going to be his legacy, his gift to humanity. One world, one planet, one slab of cement, one private central bank. Jared Kushner has announced that he's preparing an immigration plan to present to President Trump in the coming days. And Kushner was at Time Magazine's Time 100 Summit, that he's put together a very detailed proposal that encompasses three major themes: improving border security, moving toward a so-called merit-based system, and maintaining our country's humanitarian values. And he's saying that Trump has been involved in crafting the proposal. Of course, you know, the Democrats are basically going to be fighting this tooth and nail. So will the globalists. Americans for Legal Immigration activists are calling for the White House to fire Jared Kushner before Kushner can roll out this immigration plan, which will contain guest worker amnesty plans for millions of illegals. All right. International non-governmental organizations are now urging France to suspend the Libya boat delivery, the delivery of boats to Libya's Coast Guard, over concerns they would be used to intercept migrants. Well, yeah, that's what the Coast Guard is supposed to do. Now, the groups who are opposed to this include Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders. French Armed Forces Minister Florence Parly had said in February, agreed to donate 6 boats to the Libyan Navy, under which the Coast Guard operates, in order to help them, basically, in the fight against illegal immigration. But these pro-immigration groups are saying the vessels could be used to block migrant boats attempting to reach Europe, forcing those on board to return to war-torn Libya. Well, yes, that's the whole point of border security, that not everybody can just walk on in. Over in France, the Yellow Vest protests are still continuing on, and many of the Yellow Vest protesters have suffered life-changing injuries at the hands of French police, and they've now banded together to launch their own anti-brutality association. Just a second here. Okay. So one of the people who is helping to form this group is Jerome Rodriguez. And this was the Yellow Vest leader who was hit in the eye with a tear gas canister, which blinded him in that eye. So it's getting very, very tense over there in France. Apparently, there was a football game, the Coup de France final in Paris, by which we mean soccer, and Macron sat in the stands to watch the game, and apparently didn't really make a big deal of his being there, didn't want to draw attention to himself, but he got spotted, and during the final moments of the game, the football fans were all chanting, "Blank you, Macron, blank you, Macron," over and over again, rhymes with truck. The whole world is going crazy. We're coming up on the Finland election, and Brussels is panicking because the populist candidates are all surging in the polls. Finland would like to join the likes of Poland, Hungary, and Italy and Bulgaria by electing its first populist leader in 20 years. Brussels doesn't like that. George Soros doesn't like that either. Going into the EU election, Nigel Farage's Brexit party has soared to a 6-point lead over the nearest rivals in the Labour Party. People want their countries back. They want the borders closed. They want their cultures back. Apparently, Twitter has started purging UKIP candidates' accounts right before the EU election. And I imagine that some of those candidates are going to be very upset, and that if they prevail despite this, we might actually see Europe take the lead in restoring free and open communication on social media. Now, the reality is the migrants are pouring on in, but the actual number of requests for asylum, or the actual number granted, have dropped almost 40%. They're getting full up. They're running out of room. Apparently, the Department of Justice has indicted a state judge in Massachusetts for allowing an illegal immigrant to escape ICE by sneaking him out the back door. So he's in trouble. I'm glad that they're enforcing this. All right, getting into the world of political correctness. Out in California, there is a teenager who was set to become her high school's first Latinx valedictorian. And apparently the school changed its policy, saying that the valedictorian status now had to be shared by the top 10 students. And she's very angry. She worked hard to get those grades. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting down toward the bottom of the hour. All right, Boeing, it looks like they're getting deeper and deeper into trouble. And part of it has to do with the new avionics on the 737 MAX and the fact that safety features which had been standard on the earlier models were now optional at added cost. And apparently Boeing didn't mention to Southwest Airlines or the FAA that these critical safety alerts on the 737 MAX had been disabled. So it's just staggering. Not only did Boeing disable the alerts, which would notify pilots when the two sensors on the new MAX 8s were reporting dramatically different data, make them part of a new premium package of safety features, but the manufacturer somehow neglected to tell the airline and its regulator that the alerts had been disabled. And the result was that Southwest never updated its safety manuals for pilots to reflect the fact that the alerts had been disabled. Now, a whistleblower has come forward saying there is another issue having to do with that MCAS system. And apparently the unreported issue involves a foreign object damaging the wiring of the angle of attack sensor. And a source within the FAA is saying the agency is considering a new approach to the probe because of the report. In other words, we're no longer talking about evaluating a mechanical problem. We're talking about corporate malfeasance. All right, we're going to take ourselves a phone call. Eric in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Eric, are you there? I do not hear Eric. Okay. All right. All righty. And so is Eric not? Eric dropped. Okay. All right. Now, as if flaky airplanes weren't bad enough, airlines are still trying to figure out ways to cram more people into the airplanes to make more money. And they just had this convention for the companies that manufacture the interiors of the aircraft. When you buy an aircraft from like Boeing, you don't get the finished at the gate aircraft. You put your own interior into it. And some of them, of course, are very plush for the first class customers. But pushing the other end is an Italian seat manufacturer, Avio Interiors, and it was out there selling what it calls the Skyrider standing seat. Now, this is an idea the company unveiled about a decade ago, but they're pushing to make it a little more appealing to airlines. And basically, it is a bicycle seat with a lightly padded upright piece of plastic to lean your back against. That's basically it. And it's intended for, well, obviously short haul flights, because you're not going to be I don't know if this is ever going to pass safety muster. But maybe airline safety, who knows? I mean, it's just the way we're going. Okay, looks like Eric in Tennessee is back. Aloha, Eric. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm back, Mike. Aloha from Tennessee. It seems to me you mentioned that Claire plays the harp.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
It's funny because a bunch of years ago, I actually played or carved out of ice 2 angels playing a harp for a Christmas party.
That must have been very, very lovely.
It was. I got pictures of it. And if I can scan them or take a picture of it and send it to you, I will.
I'm sure that would cheer Claire up. She likes anything connected to harps. And, she has this Celtic harp, which I try and keep tuned. But with her back injury and all, she really has not been able to play as much as she'd like.
Are you going to be able to move that when you move back to the mainland eventually?
Oh, yeah. There's no way that Claire would let me leave that one behind. I'm probably going to leave. I'm probably going to leave like my 5-string banjo.
Yeah. Well, bring all you can. I mean, why not? Yeah.
All it's going to cost is, the money to pack it up and ship it over there. And like I said on Friday's show here, we need an angel to do like a major cash infusion, or we're going to be in trouble out here.
Yeah. Well, you got one here.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I thank you for your very, very generous offer, and we're seriously considering it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to email you tomorrow about more of that, but I just wanted to, it just hit a nerve with me that I carved these 2 angels playing a heart-shaped harp, believe it or not. And
Yep.
This is probably maybe 25 years ago. And I also carved
Okay,
Jesus.
Eric, I hate to do this to you. I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over in Iceland, the District Court of Reykjavik is ordering Valitor, who's a partner of Visa and MasterCard, to pay WikiLeaks $10 million for refusing to lift its 2011 banking blockade against the whistleblowing site, despite a court order. And we're seeing this alarming trend where corporations are starting to basically say, we're in charge, not you. So we'll see what's going to happen. But apparently, Valitor is being ordered to basically make the payment to WikiLeaks, payment processor DataCell, and WikiLeaks publisher Sunshine Press, after Valitor failed to comply with a 2013 Supreme Court order to resume processing credit card payments for WikiLeaks. And I hope this will set a precedent, because we're seeing a lot of abuse where these corporations are just out there throwing their weight around and acting like they're becoming the government, and maybe in their minds they think they are. Okay, there's been a lawsuit. This goes all the way back to George W. Bush's warrantless wiretapping program. And the judge just threw it out, saying that allowing the case to go forward would create an unacceptable and exceptionally grave danger to the country. In other words, it's none of your business. Now, the lawsuit was filed in 2008. It alleged that the snooping, eventually named the Terrorist Surveillance Program by the Bush administration, violated the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution as well as the Foreign Intelligence Service Act. So, really, it's just out of control. The government's going to spy on you. Just get used to it. When the courts side with the government to protect their secrets, we're in a world of hurt. We are in a world of hurt. Okay, from Amazon country, if you will. Amazon is starting to use a new automated employee tracking system to basically see where and when the employees are going. And basically, it can fire workers that it sees as low on productivity, and there's no human being involved. That's a little scary. So there's a report from The Verge showing that Amazon uses a stringent set of metrics to track the performance of workers in the warehouses and can automatically terminate their employment if they fail to meet certain standards. In one facility located in Baltimore, the investigation found that approximately 300 full-time workers in one facility were fired for inefficiency between 2017 and 2018. That was 10% of the factory's overall workforce. I would never work for a place like that. Remember patent trolls? It's a very despicable aspect of the legal industry. Basically, it's a company that is set up that files for patents. And today, the patent rules are kind of loosey-goosey. When the patent office was first created, you had to demonstrate that the patented device system would actually work. In fact, you were required to submit a working model. And the models were just absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, they got melted together during a fire at the patent office, but I understand that that whole melted mass is now a decoration in the front lobby. Well, the patent office does not require a working model any longer, and they don't require that you demonstrate the suggested object is actually going to work. Even worse than that, the patent language can be rather vague. And so these companies will get these patents, and then they'll go on out and look for anybody that they think is infringing on their patent, and they'll sue them, or they'll demand payment. And patent trolling has risen to prominence in the past decade, driving explosive growth in patent litigation against firms of all sizes. Well, this town in East Texas, Marshall, was sort of the poster boy for patent trolling, but they've sort of started to go into decline, and the patent trolling industry is moving to Delaware, where they have even looser corporate laws. Now, here's a good one. There was this guy, Jason Steiber, and he was driving along the road eating a McDonald's hash brown, and he got pulled over by Westport Police Corporal Sean Wong Wan, who insisted Steiber was moving his lips as he held an object resembling a cell phone to his face, and he wrote him out a $300 ticket, which is, by the way, exactly the same thing that we have here in Hawaii. If you are caught using your cell phone while driving, you will get a $300 ticket. And so this Steiber spent his own money and 13 months in court, and finally a judge found that Jason Steiber was not guilty, that it was just a hash brown. So, Okay. Now, up in New York, they have their own version of the Green New Deal. This is not Alexandria's, this is New York City. And one of their objectives is to phase out red meat by 50% in all city-run schools, hospitals, and correctional facilities by 2040. And New York would be the first city in the world to adopt such a policy. And it was announced after New York schools adopted Meatless Monday in an effort to encourage the consumption of less meat. So somewhere down the road, the breakfast of champions is going to be, hey, here's your morning serving of hay, here's your lunch serving of hay, here's your evening serving of hay. Social justice warriors are going to be very unhappy about this. Somebody did a poll and found out that 81% of Americans agree that people are too easily offended these days. And the social justice warriors, of course, were selling this idea that being offended was good. The more offended you are, the better you are, the better the social justice warrior you are, going around finding things to be offended by. I remember Bloom County doing a cartoon about that. Russia Today has come out with a documentary, and this one is going to anger a lot of people in the transgender community. The documentary is called simply I Want My Sex Back, and it is interviews with transgender people who now regret changing their sex. Now, there are a lot of people who go through the surgery and the hormone treatments, and they get on the other side and they realize their lives are not better, that it didn't fix the problems. In fact, it made their lives more complicated, and they want to go back. But because of the political agenda behind the transgender movement, corporate media in this country really doesn't report on it. People who are saying, I'm unhappy with what happened, they get marginalized. They get ignored. Over in Chicago, over the last couple of days, hundreds of flights were canceled. There was this late April, and we're talking late April. Wednesday is the 1st of May. But there was a huge snowstorm that just laid a swath from Montana to Michigan. And this is the first time snow has fallen this late in the season since 1989. So gosh darn that human-caused global warming. So let's see, the parts of Montana, portions of the Dakotas, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan all got hit over the weekend. It's still snowing in the heart of America. And that means a shorter growing season. No bumper crops this year. Over at the American Enterprise Institute, they have published a new study showing that the plans put forward in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal would have absolutely no effect on Earth's climate. That the impact would be minimal at best. Now, this plan being put forward by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would abolish fossil fuels without saying what's going to replace them, eliminate millions of jobs, cost households $600,000 annually, at an overall price tag of $93 trillion, and do nothing to stem the tide of climate change. Because climate changes for natural reasons, like that big ball of fusing hydrogen up there in the sky, and the changing shape and orientation of Earth's orbit. Story over Touchstone Connect. I imagine that Bayer is definitely suffering from buyer's remorse over having bought Monsanto, and I understand that their stockholders gave the CEO the heave-ho over what has turned out to be an epically disastrous deal. And again, much of what we're hearing about, like that lawsuit out in California occurred after the purchase was done. But anybody with a little bit of due diligence could have looked at Monsanto and said, there are problems here just waiting to happen. So the gist of this article is the fact that for 40 years, Monsanto and the EPA have known that there were problems with glyphosate. But it makes money, and that's a good thing. And as long as it makes money, that's all that really matters. In the fascist states of America, doesn't matter if it's glyphosate or vaccines or defective whatever. If we can get the people to buy it, that's a good thing. Or if we can make the people buy it, that's a good thing. The debate is already going on over the Notre Dame rebuild, and I'm sure the Catholics are very unhappy about it, but they don't own the building. The government of France does, and the government of France can pretty much do whatever they want. Last week we were talking about a suggestion to rebuild Notre Dame with Islamic minarets to prove that France was being more inclusive. Well, there's another plan out there where French architects want to replace the cathedral's roof with a glass and steel structure, not unlike the pyramid over by the Louvre, and have it filled up with plants, which I think would be very, very pretty, as long as you can make the engineering work. We all know about the marijuana industry. And one of the reasons that states went ahead with legalizing marijuana for recreational use was obviously to generate tax revenues, and more to the point, to basically get rid of the illicit pot market. Well, it seems to have backfired because at least in one store in Devon, Alta, not sure what that's supposed to represent, they can't get a supply from the pharmaceutical companies. And so people are going back to the illicit pot market. They're going back to growing in their backyards. Another little study has come on out here. Women who use antibiotics for more than 2 months are 35% more likely to suffer a heart attack or a stroke. And they're saying they think it's cumulative, so the more frequently a woman uses antibiotics during her lifetime, the greater the eventual risk. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about vaccines. There is a U.S. Navy warship, Fort McHenry, was deployed to the Persian Gulf. It has been there since December of 2018, and it's quarantined, stranded at sea, because of a viral mumps outbreak that has hit 27 sailors and Marines. Now, every member of the crew on that ship had been vaccinated with the MMR vaccine, but it turns out the vaccine was defective. And remember what we said about attenuated pathogen vaccines coming back full strength. So the ship has not made a port call since early January, and now isn't likely to for at least another month. That's a very long stretch. Deployed U.S. warships usually have port calls at least once a month to repair systems and rest the crew. But this appears to be another classic example of the vaccine actually triggering the outbreak. Another story, this one from Natural News. Basically, the measles outbreak is propaganda. It's a sales tool. And the CDC is finally actually admitting that nearly all of the outbreaks are being caused by infected migrants. And of course, the corporate media blames the anti-vaxxers. But the CDC reports from local health departments across the country that it's the illegal aliens called migrants that are spreading the disease. The mumps, the rubella, the pertussis, and all these record-level diseases hitting Europe and the United States. But it's all your fault because you didn't take your vaccine. Over in California, 2 universities there, UCLA and Cal State LA, are now quarantining students who cannot prove they've had the measles vaccination. And the idea is if you've been exposed to measles and if you've been hanging around with the illegal immigrants you have, you're basically placed in quarantine. Now, it's a soft quarantine. Basically, 119 students and 8 faculty members were ordered simply to avoid contact with others. Now, Alex Jones has a somewhat different point of view, which we'll get back to after these words from our sponsors. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And apparently up in Maine, their House of Representatives just passed a bill saying that there are no more non-medical exemptions for vaccines. So we're property. The government will decide what medicines you get, even if they don't work or are actually harmful, because it makes money. Now, Alex Jones has a somewhat different take, and I'm presuming that he's being metaphorical here. But apparently he's out there saying that the globalists are weaponizing the illegal migrant flows to spread the measles outbreak throughout America. And the Center of Disease Control, again, has admitted illegal migrants are the original carriers. And the corporate media is out there saying, oh, no, it's you people who refuse vaccines. It's all your fault. Indiegogo is now banning anyone who questions vaccines. We're rapidly morphing into a country in which corporate interests rule everything. Now, the way pharmaceuticals used to work is a pharmaceutical company would come up with a medication. They would get a patent on it. That would get them their market exclusivity. And then after a while, the patent would expire and the drug would go into what is called the generics, which means any pharmaceutical company can manufacture it. And obviously, the generics are much lower cost. Washington is pushing for more intellectual property rights in the pharmaceutical industry. And India is very upset because it's a clear threat to their generic drug trade. And New Delhi is saying that there's a new U.S. government report out there that is accusing India of distributing counterfeit drugs worldwide. Now, there are problems with counterfeit drugs. It's not confined to India, but there have been a couple of scandals. It's another reason to maybe not take those little pills if you don't have to. Down in Guantanamo, those terrorists, they're getting long in years. The oldest man still held in military detention in Guantanamo is 71 years old. Many others are in their 50s, and they are all starting to show age-related illnesses. And under the law, these patients have to be given the same medical treatment as any other military person, which is going to cost a lot of money. So it's not a prison anymore. It's an assisted care living facility. Over in China, Chinese scientists have succeeded in implanting human genes into monkeys to make them smarter. And they were able to enhance the brain capacity of rhesus macaques, making them more human-like by adding an extra infusion of smarts, enhanced memory capabilities. It's getting into Planet of the Apes kind of stuff. I should be hearing my exit music right about now, I think. There it is. All right. Wasn't sure if my clock had gone cattywampus. Okay. Time to end of our show. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Have a good evening, and aloha, America.